It had been nearly 3 months since the accident. A car crash, they called it. But to Sarah, it felt like more than just a collision of metal and flesh. It felt like the world had been torn open, and she had been given a glimpse of what lay beyond. But no one believed her. Not even her closest friends. They thought it was a side effect of the trauma, visions born from a mind struggling to make sense of an impossible event. But Sarah knew better. The dreams had started long before the crash, in that strange half-conscious state where everything felt both real and distant. She had seen the future. A world on the edge of a technological revolution. The most brilliant minds were at the helm of this change. People like Elon Musk, whose ideas would shape the future of humanity. But what she saw in those visions wasn't what anyone would call utopia. There were whispers of control, of people being manipulated by the very technology they created. She had seen a world divided, one where those who embraced Musk's innovations thrived, while those who resisted were left behind. The future was a binary choice, and she was caught in the middle of it. Before we continue, I wanted to ask you a quick favor. We are aiming to reach 1,000 subscribers here on YouTube, and your help is very important. And that's why if you sign up and comment subscribed, I will respond to your comment as a way of saying thank you. Thank you very much for your support. Now let's continue. Sarah sat by the window, staring out at the gray sky, trying to quiet the storm inside her mind. She had to find the answers, but where would she even begin? Every moment felt like a countdown to something inevitable, yet she had no idea what. The phone on the table buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Ethan, one of the few people who hadn't completely dismissed her. "I need to talk to you. Meet me at the usual place." She sighed, rubbing her temples. She wasn't sure if talking to him would help, but it was a distraction she desperately needed. Maybe he'd have something useful to say this time. She had to believe that anyone, could understand. Because if she didn't find a way to explain these visions, she feared they would consume her. Grabbing her jacket, she stepped out into the cold evening air. The world around her was ordinary, nothing like the chaos she felt within. But as she walked through the streets, she could almost feel the weight of those visions bearing down on her. Something was coming, and it was far worse than she could imagine. The cafe was as quiet as ever when Sarah arrived. The faint hum of a distant espresso machine blended with the low murmur of conversations, but her mind was elsewhere. Ethan was sitting by the window, his fingers drumming nervously on the table as if he, too, could sense the pressure in the air. As Sarah approached, he stood up quickly, almost as if he'd been waiting for her to show up. "I've been looking into it," he said without greeting, his voice low but urgent. "The stuff you mentioned, the visions, there's something to it." His eyes darted nervously around the room, making sure no one was listening. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean? What have you found?" She couldn't hide the skepticism in her voice, but part of her wanted to believe. She wanted to find something, anything, that would explain the nightmare she was living. Ethan leaned in closer, lowering his voice further. "It's all connected. The crash, the dreams, they're all pointing to something. I've been going through some old files, data from the early days of Musk's ventures. There's a pattern." He hesitated, watching her carefully, waiting for her to react. Sarah frowned, trying to keep her emotions in check. "What kind of pattern?" Ethan handed her a tablet. On it was a series of images, news articles, press releases, and images of Musk with various technological breakthroughs. But what caught her eye wasn't the usual stuff. It was a list of names, dates, and cryptic references to projects she hadn't heard of before. There were mentions of something called Project Horizon. The name felt strangely familiar, but she couldn't place why. "This project, it's tied to the visions you've been having," Ethan continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "The technology you've seen in your dreams, the way society is split, it's all in here. Musk's people have been working on something much bigger than we thought. And I think it's not just about colonizing Mars." Sarah felt her heart race. This was more than she had hoped for, a concrete lead, an opening to something larger than she could comprehend. But she knew better than to get excited too soon. Ethan had always been the one to dig into conspiracy theories, and she didn't want to fall down that rabbit hole again. Yet, something about the way he was speaking, the urgency in his eyes, it felt different this time. She scrolled through the documents, absorbing everything she could. The more she read, the more she understood that the visions weren't just fragments of a troubled mind, they were warnings. Project Horizon wasn't about innovation, it was about control. And it was too late to stop it. "Do you think this is real?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. She didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. Ethan nodded, but his expression was grim. "I don't know, but I think they're planning to launch it soon. And if we don't stop it, it'll change everything. You might be the key to stopping it, Sarah." Her mind raced. "How? What do I need to do?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, locking eyes with her. "We need to find out who's behind Project Horizon. There are people in high places, people Musk trusts. If we can get close to them, we might have a chance." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had no idea how they would do it, but she knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back now. Her role in this, whatever it was, had just begun. And with it came a responsibility she wasn't sure she was ready for. The next few days were a blur of meetings, secretive phone calls, and a mounting sense of urgency. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her life had been turned upside down in the blink of an eye. It was all moving too fast. She was in way over her head. But the more she thought about what Ethan had said, the more the pieces of her vision started to make sense. Project Horizon wasn't just about technology, it was about reshaping the future. The world Musk wanted to build wasn't one that Sarah was willing to accept. Late one night, after hours of studying the documents Ethan had given her, Sarah's eyes finally landed on something that made her heart stop. Among the records was a list of scientists, engineers, and corporate partners involved with Project Horizon. The name at the top of the list was familiar: Dr. Vincent Hawk. Sarah's fingers trembled as she read through his credentials, tracing the thread back through time. Hawk had been one of the first researchers to work alongside Musk in the early days of his Mars colonization plans. But his name had faded from the public eye after a mysterious incident years ago, something about unethical experiments. She remembered the whispers. Some had called it a cover-up. Others claimed it was the death of his career. But no one knew the full story. Ethan had been right. Dr. Vincent Hawk was involved in Project Horizon, and if anyone could explain the connection between the visions and Musk's true intentions, it was him. Her heart raced. "I have to find him," she muttered under her breath. But she didn't know where to begin. Hawk had disappeared from the radar years ago, vanishing into thin air. There were rumors he had been hiding somewhere in Europe, but it was all conjecture. How could she track someone so elusive? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Ethan's face appeared in the crack, his eyes wide with urgency. "Sarah, you need to see this." She followed him to the living room, where he handed her a tablet with a live news feed playing. On the screen, an image of Musk appeared, his face cold and unfeeling, surrounded by a team of government officials. The caption read, "Elon Musk reveals new partnership with international governments for Project Horizon's global expansion." Her stomach dropped. Musk had made it official. The project was no longer a rumor, it was happening. Ethan's voice broke through her shock. "This is it, Sarah. They're about to roll out Project Horizon on a global scale. We need to act fast, before it's too late." Sarah felt a wave of dread settle over her. The world was about to change in ways she couldn't even begin to comprehend. And it was up to her to stop it. But the more she thought about it, the more the weight of the task crushed her. How could she, a simple journalist, hope to take on one of the most powerful men in the world? Ethan stepped closer, his face determined. "We can't do this alone. We need to gather allies, find those who want to stop Horizon before it's too late." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I'll do whatever it takes. But I need to find Hawk. He's the key." Ethan nodded, and for the first time since their meeting, Sarah felt a spark of hope. They had a plan, even if it was still incomplete. They would find Hawk. They would uncover the truth behind Project Horizon. And they would do whatever it took to stop it. But as she sat down, her mind racing with possibilities, she realized one harsh truth: time was running out. Sarah and Ethan spent the next several days scouring the dark web, cross-referencing old contacts, and piecing together any clue that might lead them to Dr. Vincent Hawk. But the trail was cold. Every lead was a dead end. It felt as though the good doctor had vanished off the face of the earth, as though someone had erased all traces of his existence. Even the most elusive hackers Sarah knew couldn't track him down. But then, just when she was about to give up, an encrypted message appeared in her inbox. It was from an anonymous source, someone who claimed to know where Hawk was hiding. The message was cryptic. "The good doctor has been in hiding since the event. You'll find him in the mountains. The rest of the world won't understand, but you're getting closer. Time is ticking." Sarah stared at the words, her mind racing. The mountains? Which mountains? And what event was the source referring to? There were no details, just a vague hint of urgency. Ethan, who had been staring over her shoulder, spoke up. The mountains could be anywhere. This doesn't help much. No, Sarah said, shaking her head. It's a clue. There's a place, a research facility in the Alps. It's remote. I remember reading about it years ago. It was shut down after Hawk disappeared. Everyone assumed it was because of funding issues, but what if? She trailed off, the realization dawning on her. Dr. Hawk hadn't been silenced by the system. He had chosen to disappear, to go underground. And now, after all these years, it seemed that he was preparing for something. What it was, Sarah had no idea, but it was all connected to Project Horizon. Do you think he's still there? Ethan asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Sarah hesitated. It was a long shot. The facility had been abandoned, sealed off by both private and governmental forces. But something about the message felt real, as though this was the only lead they had left. I don't know, she admitted, but it's our best shot. With no time to waste, Sarah and Ethan packed their bags and prepared for the journey. They didn't have much, just enough gear to get them through the next few days in the wilderness. The plane tickets were booked under fake names, the kind of precautions they'd been forced to take after several close calls with security. The closer they got to the truth, the more danger they were in. The journey to the Alps was a blur of long flights, layovers, and dark nights in cheap hotels. The farther they went, the more Sarah felt the weight of what they were about to do. They were trespassing in an area where even governments feared to tread. They were going to confront a man who, for all intents and purposes, was a ghost. And they had no idea what kind of person they would find when they reached him. When they finally arrived in the small town at the base of the Alps, the world around them felt strangely silent. The air was crisp, colder than Sarah had expected. There were no bustling tourists or street vendors, just a quiet village nestled against the mountains, as if the rest of the world had forgotten it existed. This is it, Sarah said softly, looking around. Her eyes were drawn to the distant peaks. Somewhere up there, hidden in the snow-covered mountains, was the answer to everything. And she was about to find it. Ethan looked around nervously. I don't like this, Sarah. It feels wrong. She nodded, a knot of unease forming in her stomach. But there was no turning back. They had come too far. As they set out into the mountains the next morning, they didn't know what awaited them. But one thing was certain, the answers they sought were buried deep in the frozen peaks, and they would stop at nothing to uncover the truth. The journey up the mountain was harder than Sarah had anticipated. The weather was unpredictable, shifting from clear skies to heavy snowstorms with no warning. Every step felt like a battle against nature itself, the cold biting into their skin and the wind howling in their ears. Yet, despite the harsh conditions, Sarah pushed forward. She had to, there was no other choice. The answers they sought were just ahead, hidden somewhere within the mountain range. By the time they reached the location marked in the cryptic message, it was late afternoon. They had been hiking for hours, their muscles sore and their spirits low. But Sarah refused to stop. She could feel it, a pull, like an invisible thread guiding them through the snow. And then, just as the sun began to dip behind the jagged peaks, they saw it. At first, it looked like nothing more than a faint silhouette against the mountainside, barely visible beneath the thick veil of snow. But as they drew closer, the outline of a building began to take shape. It was hidden from view, nestled deep into the rock face, a place designed to blend in with its surroundings. The structure was old, abandoned, but still standing, a testament to the secrecy of its past. This is it, Sarah breathed, her voice filled with awe. She had expected a small, inconspicuous building, but this was something far more substantial, an underground facility, built into the very mountain itself. The sheer scale of it took her breath away. Ethan was the first to speak. How the hell did they keep this a secret? This isn't just some research lab. This is military-grade stuff. Sarah nodded in agreement. The facility's architecture was too sophisticated, too intentional to be anything less than a top-secret operation. Everything about it screamed high security, from the reinforced doors to the thick steel walls. This was no place for the faint of heart. The closer they got, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. The air was unnaturally still, the silence oppressive. The world seemed to shrink down to just the two of them and the looming facility. It was as though the mountain itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. "I don't like this, Sarah," Ethan muttered, looking around nervously. "This place feels like a tomb." Sarah's heart raced in her chest, but she refused to let fear take hold. They had come this far. They had to find Dr. Hawk. With one last look at Ethan, she stepped forward, pulling her coat tighter around her body. They were about to enter a place that had been forgotten by the world. A place where the past and future collided, where the consequences of Project Horizon lay waiting to be discovered. As they approached the entrance, Sarah noticed something strange. The door, despite its heavy appearance, was slightly ajar, as though someone had been here recently. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded, her hand instinctively reaching for the small gun hidden in her jacket. It was a precaution, one she had hoped she wouldn't need, but it had become all too clear that the stakes were higher than ever before. She pushed the door open, the hinges creaking loudly in the stillness. The cold air inside hit them like a wall, and they both stepped cautiously into the dimly lit corridor beyond. They had no idea what they would find, or who they would find, but Sarah knew one thing for sure: the truth was here, buried in the depths of the mountain. And nothing, not even fear, would stop her from uncovering it. The dim corridor stretched before them, the faint echo of Sarah's boots on the metal floor the only sound in the tense silence. She kept her hand close to her holstered gun, aware that Ethan mirrored her movements. They were deep in the heart of the abandoned facility now, and every turn, every darkened corner, seemed to conceal another secret they weren't meant to uncover. As they moved forward, Sarah's eyes caught a glimpse of something: strange markings on the walls. Symbols, etched into the metal like forgotten relics of an ancient language. She stopped, tracing one with her fingers. It was cold smooth, as if it had been untouched for decades. "Ethan, look at this," she murmured. Ethan stepped up beside her, his gaze scanning the symbols. This is Dr. Hawk's work," he said, his voice steady but with a hint of awe. "These symbols, they were part of the coding system he developed for the Horizon project." Sarah's breath caught. Horizon. The project that had once seemed like an isolated anomaly, but which they now realized was at the center of something far larger than they had ever imagined. If Dr. Hawk's legacy was here, it meant the truth was still hidden within these walls. They continued their advance, the weight of the discovery pressing on them. They were getting closer. Every step felt heavier with the realization that they were on the brink of uncovering something monumental. At the far end of the corridor stood a reinforced door, unmarked and yet somehow unmistakable. Beside it was a small keypad, flickering with a faint green light. Ethan stepped forward without hesitation, fingers moving quickly across the panel. "I can bypass this," he said, focused. A few seconds later, a soft click signaled the door was unlocked. The vault door beyond was massive, its surface gleaming coldly in the dim light. Sarah's heart raced as she stepped forward, Ethan following close behind. This was it. The secrets they had been searching for were behind that door. The vault was finally opening. Leave your opinion in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that we can reach the brand of thousands of subscribers. With your help we can reach that number as quickly as possible. Thanks for being here, and until the next one.